All right, Dave, it looks like it's showtime again. Every week we're here live talking to you on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central. Dave, I feel like we just did this minutes ago.
I think we did. Oh, wait, it's been 7 days already. You're right. It's been a quick week.
The funny thing is I go back and watch these and I'm always in the orange shirt. A lot of times I'm in an orange button up shirt. And so I can't tell a difference between weeks. So this time I wore an orange shirt, but I think next week I'm going to change up the color because if not, I have no idea from week to week to week because I'm wearing the same outfit.
Yeah, it definitely is a problem if you're wearing the same thing to figure that out. I try to mix it up, but I do realize that some weeks I end up with the same shirt on. So,
Yeah, I don't want people to think I only wear one orange shirt, but I have a whole closet of orange shirts. And so I want people to understand the difference.
well, as long as you got a week between so you can wash it, I guess it's okay.
Yeah, that's right. And for those joining us live, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this. What we do every single week on Facebook and YouTube is we come on and ask Dave retirement questions. And so we're live, we're here asking questions, and we throw as many topics as we can at him. So I have a list of questions that I put together beforehand, and then we also encourage you to send your questions in. And so if you can go ahead and comment, let us know where you're watching from and maybe the questions you have. I also would like to know how prepared you are in retirement. So for those joining us live, let's do a scale if you're here and want to participate. So 1 is I'm not even close to being prepared, and 10 is I am so prepared it could hit me tomorrow and I'm ready. Dave, where do you think people are going to fall on this?
Most of them would be probably around 5 is what I would guess. I think we're going to hit an average right around there. But I ask this question oftentimes in the various presentations that I do when I'm meeting with people, and we see a good mix. We see about half of them that are over that 5 number, and we've got half that are under. And it's interesting to see the issue seems to be is everyone's got a different reason for why they're over or under. That's the interesting one to me is why are they feeling secure and why aren't they feeling secure?
Exactly. Well, Jerry pops in and she says she's an 8, and I think that's great. So that's where we're trying to get everybody. We're trying to get them to move from a 5 up to an 8 or wherever they are, and progressively get up to a 10, right?
Absolutely. And the ones that I see that are 10s, the interesting one that generally, if we get a 10, it's someone that's got a big pension that is guaranteed and that has a lot of Social Security. So it's guaranteed income. And we talk about that oftentimes here on the show, that it's really the guaranteed income that people are really needing to get them through those years of retirement.
Yeah, we've got Gary said Gary's at a 9. Welcome, Gary and Jerry. It's nice to have both of you here. And Jerry's also saying a defined pension.
Yeah, which leads to what I talked about. As we get higher, it seems the more guaranteed income we have. Now, obviously, if people have saved millions of dollars and realize that no matter what the market does or taxes, what happens there, they can still get through. They're going to feel comfortable. But for the majority of people, it's going to be those guaranteed streams of income.
And Mike's saying I'm at a 7 or 8, and some of the reasons is from Dave's ideas.
Thank you, Mike. Good to hear that. We're happy to know that we're helping people to get better information so they can make the adjustments. One of the things that I find is a few adjustments, minor adjustments, can make a huge difference in what a retirement's going to look like over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
And Dave, so keep those coming in, everyone. But Dave, let's jump into our questions here. So I've got a whole variety of questions for you. I love to throw some variety in to do this for you. But Josh is asking, starting a business and want to incorporate some of these investments, but also want to employ and start some investments for our kids. How much can we put into a Roth for them? And is it a good option for kids?
Josh, a couple of things that you need to be aware of when we look at the way that Roths work is if you've got a Roth IRA, you've got to have some type of earned income. Now, there are situations where you've got a small business that your kids can work in the business. We see that all the time as CPAs when we're working with clients, but they've got to be paid fairly, meaning if they were doing a job that someone else were doing, you can't pay child $100 an hour and then have all of your employees making $10 an hour. But they've also got to be able to do the work that you're saying that they're doing. Now, if they can do that and you can pay them out of the company, you would be able to pay up to $6,000 in contributions into the Roth. I'm by no means against it, especially for the younger generation. The more money they can get into the tax-free bucket, the better. Another option, though, if you can't pay them, you may look at, and we use this for clients at times as well, is the life insurance retirement plan. Insurance is going to be extremely cheap. You'll be able to build assets in a tax-free environment very quickly. And it can also provide an opportunity for you to use that money to pay for kids' college once they get to that age. So options are out there, but yeah, you've got to have earnings to put money into that Roth IRA.
And Dave, we worked together for a number of years. I mean, we're at 10 years, and over that course, you've had your kids come and work with us several times. And so we look at this as you're starting to hire your kids or bring your kids in. What's some advice you have as you're following that?
To me, I think there's some real great benefits to it. One, you're teaching them how to work, which is something that we seem to struggle with in this generation. When I look at our generation and the way we were raised, we just had to do a lot more than what we do now because so many things are done by others. People have created companies to provide services that we used to just have to do ourselves. But it also helps teach them how to handle money. They've got a job, they should be getting paid for that. What do they do with the money? Now, if you're putting it all into an IRA account, they may not have much say, that all of it's just going in there. But what we tried to do is allow our kids to have some savings money, some spending money, some to donate to the church, and help them better understand budgeting and the way a job can help them provide for their needs. And the harder they work, the more money they have. And it's really helped our kids get a better understanding on what life is.
Definitely great advice. All right, Dave, let's jump down to Stevie here. How can one plan to receive all the 401k distributions invested from their own and employer contributions?
Stevie, I'm not exactly sure the full question here. There's some confusion in the way that it's worded. I'm assuming you're talking about trying to take all of that out, maybe even in 1 year. Now, you can do conversions. So if you are taking a traditional 401k and you want to roll it into an IRA, as long as you've quit working there, you've got in-service distribution options, you can do that in a 1 year period of time. You can do that transition. It's not going to cost you anything. But if you're trying to convert it into, let's say, a Roth IRA and you've got a traditional account, you're going to want to systematically do it so you don't create big tax issues for yourself.
Dave, are you seeing clients that you work with that are getting the wrong advice, maybe from advisors on what to do on these 401ks, maybe taking it out on one lump sum or taking it out over a period of time that's actually hurting them versus helping them?
I am seeing it, not quite as much as I used to, but I'm definitely seeing it. And this last week, I was working with one of my clients. He's a tax client, not a financial advisory client where we're helping reduce the risk in retirement. But he was telling me, we were talking about his upcoming retirement. He expects to retire here in about year and a half, and he needed to pull some money out. And his advisor told him to liquidate his Roth account. He's like, there's no way your taxes are going to be higher in the future. So go ahead and take that money out now. Well, CR, the problem is he's got a pension. He's got, high Social Security earnings because he's had a good earning job throughout his lifetime. His taxes are going to be higher. They're going to be immediately higher when he retires and 2026 comes around. So, it was really hard because I had to reach back to him and I'm like, you didn't make the right decision, but it's too late now. It was done over 60 days ago. He can't put the money back in. And so it's like, you're just kind of stuck with what you did, but your advisor gave you bad advice.
And what do you do when you find these advisors giving bad advice? What's the best course of action? Like Micah said, you've helped him tremendously as he's getting back on everything with his retirement. But how do you get everything on course if we start to get off of the track a little bit?
One of the things that I try to do, and I did it in his situation, is really try to just step in and look to the future and see what we could do. Are there things that we can fix? Now, there are going to be times in all of our lives we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times that we may not see something that someone else would see. And so we give a recommendation and it's based upon our limited knowledge, or maybe we forgot to take into consideration the effect on Medicare or Social Security. And those things happen. But our biggest thing we can do is try to work through it. And if there are ways to fix it, go back and try to correct it as quickly as we can. Like in this situation, unfortunately, he was past the 60-day window that would have allowed him to put the money back and then transfer the distribution into a regular 401k distribution or IRA distribution. But really, it's just trying to educate people going forward, realize throughout all of our lives, there's going to be mistakes that are made, and we've just got to do our best to move forward from it.
And I love to see that those that are chiming in to let us know how high they are on that scale of getting closer to retirement. And it's really great that they're coming on and becoming more educated, because it feels like to me, if you get to the point where, you're a 7 through 10, you're like, I'm good. I have everything I need, but there's still a lot of information out there that we could make the wrong choice or it could derail our retirement, even if we're at the top of that scale.
And one of the biggest mistakes most people make is regarding government benefits. If I look at it, this is one of the areas, and I'm trying to educate myself even further. We don't obviously sell Medicare products, Social Security, no one sells. It's just a government program. But people are making huge mistakes on some of their biggest sources of income or benefits going into the retirement. And once they make those mistakes, oftentimes they're hard to overcome. It's hard to correct that. Now, you can go back and stop collecting Social Security if you claim too early, and you may get some delayed credits if you're able to do that. Medicare, there are some options if you get into the wrong program where you may be able to go back and get a good one through a Medicare Advantage plan or something. But it's just people are not educating themselves on the decisions that need to be made and making sure they make the right one going into the retirement.
And Dave, we always encourage everyone watching live to go ahead and submit your question. And so we always get great questions from Mike and from Gary and the rest that are joining us week after week. And I wanted to bring up Gary's question. And this is a great question. He said, what do you think of funding an irrevocable life insurance trust with an indexed universal life contract that maximizes the death benefit in order to pay the newly proposed higher estate taxes?
Gary, welcome. Good to have you with us today. First off, number two, as we look at this question, I'm all for it. I think indexed universal life policies are the policies we should be using for most people for all of their insurance. Problem we have if we put a whole life policy in there, the growth's going to be so slow, you're going to have issues keeping up with inflation. And so it's going to cost you more to be able to buy the insurance that you need. If you've got a variable contract and you were to put it in there, you may have issues if the market drops 30 or 40%, as many of us believe it will over the next year or so. You may have some issues of having the money you need to keep the contract going. So I'm a big fan of this. For most people, you're going to want to and make sure you get it into that trust, as Gary's talking about, if you are going to use it for estate taxes. So it's growing outside your estate. And you may need to do some planning to make that happen, to make sure that it's being transferred correctly and you're staying inside of the current estate laws and gifting laws that are associated with it.
And Gary, I'm expecting a follow-up question because I know you submit some of those. So I'm expecting to get one of those after this. All right, Dave, let's jump back over and get back on some of the questions we have here as well. So the next one I have is from Thomas. What impact is there to your benefit if you retire at 62 but don't claim your Social Security until age 67 due to other income sources?
For many people, there's going to be very little impact, and it all is based upon how much you have in previous earnings and how many years you've had pretty high earnings. Social Security uses a 35-year period of time to determine your benefits. That's a long time. It's not like your pensions and your retirement plans where it's the highest three, the last five. What they do is they look over this 35-year window. So if you've been a pretty high paid executive or you've had average earnings that would stay consistent over the next 5 years in this situation, you've had those earnings very similar for the last 35 years, it's not going to affect them at all. I mean, I see situations where maybe it goes up $1 or $2 or nothing, not at all. There's no adjustments there. But if you're someone who maybe a spouse that stayed home raising children and has not been working out of the home, and you're trying to maximize your benefits, those last 5 years could be critical to helping you get a larger benefit paid out. So really comes down to your situation, what your work records look like. But for some of you, the best thing you could do is to retire at 62 and start putting your investments elsewhere.
Dave, let's talk about Social Security because this, regardless of where it's at right now, it's always a hot topic. Every time we get onto this show or even through your webinars, where's Social Security at right now? How do we feel that we're going to be able to be secure in what Social Security is offering?
I'm glad you asked that question because if you looked at it on the surface, Social Security is one of the best funded programs the government has. I mean, especially when we look at a period now where we've got $28 trillion of debt that's out there. The Social Security's got a surplus right now of somewhere between $2.5 and $3 trillion. Well, that seems like a lot of money, especially to individuals that are making $50,000 or $100,000 a year. But the problem is that we've got so many people coming into the program that we're going to have some financial issues somewhere around what they're saying now is about 2032. It was expected to be 2035 because prior to COVID and everything that happened there. But now they're saying 2032. Now, some people are saying, wait, we had so many elderly people die because of COVID. The program should be better stabilized than it was before. Well, from a long-term perspective, yes, But from a short-term funding perspective, no, because we've had so many people unemployed, we've not had a bunch of money going into the program. And again, when you look out to the long-term perspective, it's a train wreck. I mean, if you look at the true benefits that have got to be paid, so a small COVID blip is not going to majorly affect 30 years of Social Security's stability. Now, all of that being said, there's fixes, and there's going to be fixes. I expect that to happen somewhere around 2030. I don't see government getting super excited to fix something that's not broke until it gets there, because always when we talk about increasing taxes, which it's going to require, the other side's always showing, some elderly person getting pushed off the cliff in a wheelchair. Well, that never goes very far. So I do believe it'll get fixed, but yeah, we've got some issues there and things that have got to be handled from a government side in order for it to get fixed.
And I also appreciate the fact that you bring up, as we're getting older into retirement and we have a spouse, that we have to also pay attention to when we're collecting Social Security, because our spouse could be left with little or nothing, or a lot more, depending on when we take our Social Security. And I think that's a very valid point that you brought up.
It really is. And it's one of the things you've got to remember when you do pass on. Social Security stops for you. Now, can a spouse receive your higher benefits if you're getting higher benefits as a survivor? Absolutely. But one of those benefits stop if you're married, and now you're leaving a spouse that's got less income. Now, in theory, she or he should be spending a little bit less because there's only one person in the household, but you still have a mortgage. You've still, for many people, they've still got to heat a home. They've got cars. They've got all these things. So what you may have is a situation where the cost didn't go down proportionally to the amount of income that was lost, and especially if you had a pension that was only on your lifetime. It wasn't a joint pension. So you do need to plan for both of you. I think that's something an advisor needs to also look at when you're going through the process, is what were to happen if one passed away halfway through retirement? What effect would that have? And does it leave enough money for the other individual to be able to maintain the lifestyle that they're hoping for?
And I love it, Dave. Gary submitted a follow-up question. I knew it was coming. Gary, you didn't let me down today, so thank you. I knew that was going to be here. So I wanted to jump back over, because like I said, I love the questions that come in live. Gary and Mike and the rest of you, I love them. They're so that's why we're here, to answer your questions and help guide you through retirement. It's not about just getting to the door, but actually getting all the way through. So Gary, thanks for not letting me down. This is great. So Gary says in his follow-up question, would you intentionally structure the index universal life contract as a modified endowment contract to reside in the irrevocable life insurance trust, since the purpose is to maximize the death benefit and not to maximize tax-free retirement income?
Gary, there are times that I could see that happening. Now, it's going to be based on individual facts and circumstances. One of the issues that we have from a general, so what he's talking about too, just so everybody understands, modified endowment contract is when you overfund a life insurance policy. So if you put too much money in, the government's saying, look, these were meant to be life insurance policies, not tax-free investment vehicles. Yeah, we'll give you some tax-free investment benefits, but you've got to be willing to buy a certain amount of life insurance. So what happens oftentimes, and especially now with the current rules, in order to prevent a modified endowment contract, you're going to have to pay payments into a life insurance policy 5, maybe 7 years in order to not turn that into a MEC. Well, many times if people have a lot of money, they want to move quickly, or you've got a life insurance contract where you want to be able to fund it, faster than normal, you can turn it into you can turn it into a modified endowment contract and overfund that up front, and then you don't get the tax benefits. So yeah, if someone's in that situation, Gary, I could see where it would be the right solution. I wouldn't say I would intentionally do it on all of them, but there are definitely situations where, based upon the need to get money out of their estate or to fund that, or to use the money out of maybe a retirement plan, if someone's trying to do it inside of a 401k, I could see where you'd turn that into a modified endowment contract and take those tax benefits away on the income.
And Dave, you brought up a good point that I wanted to talk about here, because we have had Jerry and Gary and Mike have all chimed in. But how hard is it to give retirement advice? Because as you said, each one of us have a different path. We're all in different circumstances. And how do we do this and give the right advice and kind of generally help each other?
It's one of the biggest things I, as a retirement risk consultant worry about, truly, CR, because you do have to educate to a general audience. You do have to give generalities many times when you're talking about planning and what would the average person do. Well, I think we've talked about it too. Average Gary, I know, lives in San Francisco. You live in Utah. There's an average amount of gas that it's going to take if you were to decide get in your car and drive to San Francisco. But you know what? I'm never going to use that average with my vehicle. If I've got a pickup truck, I'm going to use way more than average. So average is really irrelevant to me because depending on the car I'm driving, there's no chance I'm ever going to hit average. And I think that's the problem we have in retirement. It's very difficult as an educator because we do have to educate to the masses. We have to often say these are the average numbers, but it's very important for them to have individual planning because those average numbers are never going to work out perfectly for anyone that's going through the process.
And I always find that fascinating because when we get on here, we get so many questions, not only from the live viewers or replay or those that we have a big, like 4,000 questions to pull from, but every situation is different. And you're alluding to with the gas, it depending on what car you drive. And I think about everybody's situation, no matter what state they live in, that may cause issues. If they want to retire and move out of the country, there's so many different varieties that you have to be able to entertain or to be able to work through as you're giving that advice. And I commend you because to me, I look at all that and I get terrified thinking about it.
And we have so many emotions that come into it too. If we take my example of you going to see Gary in San Francisco, I can do the math to some level and calculate it out just using math. And we do that in retirement, saying, hey, this is the amount of gas it's going to take to get to Gary's based upon the average miles that your vehicle gets per gallon. But the problem is, all of us have a different comfort zone of what getting to there is. How much do we want to have in reserve? How soon are we going to want to fill up? Same thing happens in retirement. The best mathematical decision maybe is 72, but if emotionally someone can't wrap their head around, hey, I'm spending down my 401k and IRA assets in the beginning with a belief and a math knowledge that it's going to be better in the end, that's not going to work for them. If they're going to spend the first 6 years of retirement worried to death they're going to run out of money, well, we're going to have to adjust and go against the math and the science to help them get emotionally get their head wrapped around it so that they don't put themselves in the loony bin before they ever get to a point they can enjoy their retirement. So it is a challenge, CR. It definitely is.
And Gary, when I come to see you, I hope we're going to meet at the Ghirardelli chocolate place so I can get that massive bowl of ice cream and we can split that next time.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah. All right, Dave, let's jump over to William. William's asking, can a divorced person obtain an estimate from the Social Security Administration using the spouse's wages?
William, I'm not sure exactly the details of this, as far as getting it. I know I've had clients reach out to me that have called into Social Security to try to get information, and some of them have struggled. My understanding is that, yes, you can get the information, but what I found from many people is it's a struggle until you get to a point that you're really making the decision to move forward. So I would recommend you just go to the SSA and talk to them. If you don't get the answer you want, this is another problem you have with Social Security Administration. If you don't get the answer you want or the one that seems logical, you're probably going to want to call back and see if you can get somebody else, because they do have an internal problem of having not enough educated people. And therefore, what we find is they themselves often give bad advice until it gets to a point that they put everything in place and the top person has to review everything and make sure that they're doing the right thing. But fortunately, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Well, Dave, let's jump over to Yesenia. I hope I say that Yesenia right. I probably slaughtered it, but do you recommend contributing to a 401k until you meet the 500,000 limit and then contribute additional funds into a Roth, or contribute to both at the same time?
This is a great question. And it's interesting that this is asked because this is something I was pondering the other day as I was looking at one of my clients' situations. Really, it's going to come back to individual facts and circumstances, because if you look at it, some people would say, oh, let's just go ahead and in our early years, let's go ahead and fund that traditional account. Let's take those deductions. And then at the end, we'll switch over. Well, what the problem with that is usually as we age, our income goes up. So as we're aging, we're getting in higher income. So oftentimes it makes sense to say, hey, let's put all the money we can into our tax-free bucket. And then those last few years when we've got really high earnings before retirement, let's use that to start maximizing the tax deferred bucket and get the biggest benefit. So a lot of it's going to be based on earnings, but in the situation I was looking at the other day, much better situation to just go ahead and liquid or put all the money in tax-free now, and then at the very end, try to maximize that bucket before they go into retirement.
And Dave, with Yesamia, is there a concern if you overfund your bucket that you're going to end up having more complications also?
Absolutely. And there is a mathematically correct amount, and it's different for everyone is part of the problem because everyone's got a different social security amount. Everyone's got different amounts in their taxable bucket and what they're doing there. But yes, there is an amount that you want, and you can overfund it. And the consequences are you'll pay tax on that income as well as your social security. It'll create provisional income.
And Dave, Gary said it would be an honor to treat both of you to lunch or dinner in Ghirardelli Square restaurant, especially since the cost of the meal will be 100% deductible in 2021 and 2022.
CR, I think we've got to plan a trip. Now, I'm not you can drive, I guess, if you want, Star, but I'll take a plane. A little long drive for me to get to see him, but I wouldn't mind going back up to the San Francisco Bay Area again for sure.
Yeah, I definitely love that area. And thanks, Gary. Karen's asking, do you feel negative interest rates are coming to the U.S.?
This is such a tough one, Karen, because there's so many different opinions. I don't think we're going to see negative interest rates. I think, again, we're going to zero where we are. I don't see interest rates changing substantially as we listen to Fed chairman and those type of people. They're saying they're not expecting any major changes. Probably the bigger unknown out there, and there's people on both sides of the aisles, what's inflation going to do? Some people think we're going to have hyperinflation. Others say we may have a period of deflation because of the baby boomers and the lack of spending that many of them will do over the next couple of decades. So I don't know. We've got our own opinions, but I'd hate anyone to make a determination on the retirement with this regarding just my opinion.
And Dave, it's really hard to get into this and not get political as we're looking at how much more of the trillions of dollars are being spent. And as you talked about with hyperinflation, it's really hard not to jump on this and get very political very quick as we're trying to assume what's coming.
It really is. And if you look at it, I would recommend, we've talked about it before, if you're really wanting to understand the economy, I would encourage you to read David Walker's new book, Will the U.S. Be a Superpower in 2040? He does a great job of laying it out. I will tell you, you're not going to leave that book feeling very good about life. It is pretty depressing. Now, he gives a lot of great recommendations on the end of it, but there's no society that can spend at the levels we're spending without having future consequences, because regardless of what someone says about modern monetary theory and that we can just endlessly spend, the world has never had periods of time for any civilization where they could do that there didn't come consequences to them at some point after the fact.
And Dave, let's talk briefly just about hyperinflation and what that means, because there's some people on here watching saying, I get it, but do they really understand how much this is going to hurt our economy if this happens?
No, it's been too long. I mean, if you go back to the 1929 when we had the Great Depression, I mean, you could wheelbarrow full of money in to buy a loaf of bread. I mean, there were periods of time that the inflation was just so bad, the situation was so bad. And the problem is we forgot about those times. We forgot about what that might look like. And I think that's one of the issues, even with the stock market. We've got a whole segment of the population that forgot that the market actually can drop. And when it drops, it can create major issues. I can't tell you how many people I talk to all the time that they just say, no, this market will go for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I don't see anything that could ever turn this market down. Well, I heard those same stories in 2006 and 7. And where are we now as we look, or where were we in 2008 when everything collapsed? So I don't know. Myself, I'm much more conservative. I would much rather see people take a little off the table and have a little less money than no money when you look at what's ahead of us.
And Dave, we're out of time, but I do want to let people know as we're getting closer to all the webinars you have coming out and let them know that what kind of exciting things you have coming. One of the ones I want to bring up first of all is the changing world of retirement. If I can get that to pop up, some days I can get these things to work and other days I can't get these things to pop up. But so they're not working for me, but we have a couple amazing webinars coming. So we have the changing world of retirement that's coming. And that one's coming up on, let's see, April 29th. And so I encourage you to go over to the prosperityguy.com/events and go over and check out all the webinars you have. And one other one, Dave, I wanted to bring up, which I want you to tell me just a quick synopsis on this one, but how about Paychecks and Playchecks coming up on April 20th?
I'm very excited about this one. This is going to be done primarily by Tom Hegna, one of the top educators in the insurance and annuity industry. He's become a good friend of mine. We're doing a number of webinars here that we're putting together for the future. It's going to be the initial webinar on this topic. He wrote a book by the same title. It's been a bestseller out there helping people better understand the risks facing the retirement and things that they should do to get those guaranteed income streams. We talked about it in the beginning. Who has the most safe and secure retirement mentally? It's those who've got guaranteed streams of income. And this webinar is going to talk about that. He also is going to offer some opportunities to get some discounts on some of his additional training that is very critical. It's stuff I've gone through, been very helpful for me. He only educates. The other great thing about him is he's just an educator. That's all he does. And so his resources are very viable for those who are trying to change their retirement, but also for professionals who are trying to help others get to a better place too, that he can provide a lot of benefit. And very excited about it. I talked to him later this afternoon to solidify everything there, but we are looking forward to the 20th for sure.
That's great. And again, you can find all the rest of the webinars that you have available, Dave. They can find them all on your website at theprosperityguy.com/events. And again, if they want to meet with you, these are the things that we try to encourage everyone, as you talked about earlier, is that everyone's in a different situation. Not everyone's retirement is going to look the same. So with that, how can they meet with you if they want to sit down and have a conversation and figure out, is there a no-fee consultation? How do they work this out so they can at least get on track of where they need to be?
Very easy to do. See, all they've got to do is go to the website, prosperityguy.com, go to our strategy session page. You're going to fill out a simple form there and then to be taken to a link where you can get onto my calendar. And then also we have a short video there that you can watch to prepare for that meeting. And then we're going to take that time to help better understand what you're doing, to talk about how we can help you and the strategies that we have. And depending on your situation, it can go multiple ways. One of it may be a situation where, hey, you've got everything in order already. You've done a great job. There's not much we can do to help you. Maybe, hey, there's these small pieces we believe that you need to fix, and then it may be a full plan. Or we'd say, look, we really think you need to have a plan put together so we can use the math and science to figure out exactly where you're going to be over the next 30 years.
Again, so I encourage you, if you're watching live or on the replay, go over and click on the strategy session tab on the website. Go ahead and get that book so you can just have that no-fee consultation to meet with Dave and get some questions answered. I think it's kind of like what we're doing here. We're answering people's questions and helping them get a little closer to retirement. So that way, if we go through the 1 to 10, that you are getting yourself up to that 10. And then once you get there, you stay there, because I think the fear that people get there is, hey, I made it. I don't need to worry about this anymore. But in all reality, we still need to make sure that we're paying attention as we get even to the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you guys all again next week, and have a great week.